The pack stood in rings around the central stone. I stood in the lineup with my hands at my sides, the dawn cold on my knuckles. Sabine of Caldermore did not look at me when she spoke. That was the specific cruelty of it. She put on the oil this morning. She still smells of nothing. The hollow. The pack said it back to her. All of them. At once. He was already at the far end of the circle before anyone said my name. Already watching. He walked the full length of the stone floor and stopped in front of me. He did not look at the others. He looked at me the way you looked at something you had already decided. His hand was warm. That was the first thing. I had expected cold, the cold of a formal transaction, but his palm was warm against mine, and I did not know what to do with that. Elder Voss stepped forward with the scroll. His voice was the voice he used for judgments, flat and final, a voice that did not ask whether you were ready. The House of Ashgrove presents its outstanding debt to the crown, he read. He named the sum. The numbers were large. I had known them in the abstract. My father had muttered, the sum, the interest, into the fire every winter. But Elder Voss's voice made them concrete, made them a weight that translated into a body. Mine. The debt is settled in full by the transfer of one daughter of Ashgrove, Wren, second daughter, aged 24, to the household of the Alpha King of Vorn. No further claim on the House of Ashgrove. He let a beat pass. No further claim on the transferred. No further claim on the transferred. I am the sentence that closed the account. The pack did not need to be told what it meant. As the escort assembled at Rorik's left, 4 of his men, every one of them taller than anyone in Ashgrove, I heard the sound move through the rings, not words. The small collective exhale of a pack, confirming what it already knew. The hollow. Given away. Worth exactly the number Elder Voss had named, and not a single thing more. Nobody argued. Nobody looked away in discomfort. I had been the hollow for 24 years. They had practiced this. Rorik had not released my hand. I had thought I was prepared for what he looked like, because I had heard it, because everyone had. I was not prepared. He was the kind of man the world reorganizes itself around without asking. Dark hair that brushed his jaw, a square jaw cut from the same gray stone as the hills. Pale, gray-green eyes with the quality of landing on something and not letting it go. Broad shoulders and a dark coat worked with black thread at the cuffs. Beautiful in the way that cold is beautiful. Severe and total and not designed for your comfort. He was looking at me. I understood what he was doing. He was taking inventory. He released my hand. The escort moved into position. I took one step, then another, and I did not look back at my father's face. The road north was 2 hours by cart. His men did not speak to me. I did not speak to them. By the time we cleared the ash tree line and started up the hill, the cold had settled into the valley floor, and the portcullis above us was lit from below by 2 torches. The keep smelled of coal smoke and old stone, and underneath it, something sharp and clean. Iron. My hands tightened inside my sleeves. I sorted it in pieces. My mother's voice, from every year I could remember. Hold it in parts, she had said. I had learned to wait for the next part. Never all at once. And then the last, if you try to hold all of it, it holds you. So I did not try to hold my father's face, or Elder Voss's voice naming the sum, or the sound the pack had made when the escort formed up. I put each piece down somewhere on the road behind me and did not pick it up again. The portcullis was raised when we arrived. The inner courtyard was lit. I counted 6 people in the first 10 seconds, and before I had decided to, catalogued each one. Coal ash, boot leather, double shift tiredness, a medicinal smell from somewhere inside the building. I stopped cataloging. I just stopped, the way I always stopped when there was no benefit to knowing more. Rorik walked past me without a word and disappeared through the main door. The escort showed me a smaller door at the side. The threshold was old stone, worn smooth in the center. My right hand found my coat pocket before I had decided to move it. The vial was there, my mother's oil, her mixture of dried wildflower and something sharper underneath, rubbed into my wrists every morning since I was 7, until the habit lived in my hands and not in my head anymore. I uncapped it, touched one drop to my left wrist. It smelled like her hands. The borrowed scent is all anyone will find if they look. My mother built it that way, year by year, with that specific purpose, a thing they could smell that was not what I was. The armor, the only one I had. I crossed the threshold. The cot they gave me was against the north wall of the inner servants' corridor, a passage that smelled of old stone, tallow fat, and a decade of other people's footsteps. I did not sleep. I lay still and worked. By the time the keep's first bell rang, I had mapped the corridor in both directions. Coal smoke from the kitchen's morning fire, lard, a faint copper thread that meant someone had been cutting meat in the hour before dawn. 3 distinct individuals who had passed the door since I arrived. A boy who smelled of horses and iron filings. A woman who carried lavender water and nervous sweat in roughly equal parts. And a third I could not place, who moved without sound and smelled of something mineral and cold, like metal that had been left in rain. I filed that third one away. They assigned me to document work by the second morning, which was either a punishment or an accident. The clerk at the records desk read from a list without looking up. Sealed correspondence, she said. Records office, logistics, the Beta's suite. Daily rounds, twice if required. No entry into any room you're not directed to. Yes, I said. I had no way to explain that they had handed me a map and called it labor. The inner document corridor ran the full length of the keep's ground floor. Every person who had walked it since morning was still there in the air by afternoon, layered by hour, clear as writing if you knew how to read. I read carefully and put nothing on my face. The Beta's administrative suite sat at the corridor's east end. I had been past it 4 times before I noticed. On the 5th pass, my hand rose without instruction and stopped an inch from the door. There was something wrong inside. Not wrong in a way I could name. I had not entered, had no logical reason to have any information about what was behind that door. But the smell came under it anyway. Iron filings and dry parchment, which were reasonable enough. And underneath those a third thing, sharp and mineral, and belonging to nothing in these hills. A compound I had no reference for. Something brought from outside. I put my hand down and kept walking. I did not look at the door again that afternoon. Looking would have been information too, and I had learned early that information only protected you if no one knew you had it. Rorik. I had seen twice before the corridor accident, once at distance during what appeared to be a patrol briefing in the yard, once at the far end of the Great Hall when I was delivering correspondence and he was leaving. Both times I had not looked at him directly. Both times I had noted cedar and coal smoke, and something else I could not classify, something specific to him alone, like a decision that had not yet been made. Both times he had paused a half-beat longer than the space required. I had not let myself decide what that meant. The corridor was narrow where it turned toward the record room. I was reading the label on a document case, and he came around the corner fast, the way people move when they have already calculated that the passage is clear. His hand landed on my arm above the elbow to keep us both from going over. Both of us stopped. The corridor was very quiet. I could feel the warmth of his grip through my sleeve before I could think anything at all. And then thought was too late. And I was noting the cedar and decision smell at close range, and trying to remember how to stand normally. He lifted his hand. He looked at it. A single clear look, deliberate, as though checking what the contact had left behind. Then he looked at me. He said nothing. He walked on. He touched me, and then he looked at his own hand afterward. That is information I cannot afford. He looked at his own hand, as if it had acted without his permission. Do not think about what that means. Do not think about what that means. Do not... I know exactly what that means, and I have known since the corridor, and I am terrified that I am glad. I stood in the corridor until I was certain my breathing was even. Then I finished the delivery and came back the long way, through the kitchen passage, where the morning smell of bread still hung in the cold air, and I could not smell anything else at all. I was not thinking about his hand when I went to bed. I was not thinking about it when I woke. By the third morning, I was in the document corridor before the first bell, and my hand had risen, without my deciding it, to a point an inch from Marek's study door. I had been carrying the day's first stack of corridor logs, and now I was standing motionless in the draft from the north stairwell with my knuckles half curled and my face very still, reading the 3 distinct layers behind the wood: iron shavings, old paper, and underneath both of those something I had no name for. Something mineral and cold, like the inside of a mountain no one had mapped. It had the quality of a scent that traveled. The door opened from the inside. Marek smiled at me as though he had been expecting me. He was broader than I had measured from the corridors, filling the doorframe with the easy authority of a man who had never needed to announce himself. Sandy brown hair cut close to the skull, a face built for trust, wide, even-featured, the kind of face that smiled and meant it just often enough that you forgot to keep checking. His gray sash was pressed flat. His eyes were small and set slightly close, and warmer than they had any right to be. The hollow. His voice was warm, not cruel. Warm was its own category entirely. I've been hoping to introduce myself. Marek, the beta. He stepped back from the door as though offering me a view of the room. I did not look at the room. I was already reading it from where I stood. The mineral scent was strongest at the left wall, near a drawer I could see from the doorway, and it had the quality of something that had been seeping into the wood for a long time. Not from the walls. It moved when Marek moved. He carried it with him the way a man carries a debt he has stopped noticing. You found your footing quickly, he said, and he reached for the log I was carrying and lifted it from my arms with the ease of a man performing a favor. I let him. It cost me nothing to let him think he had given me something. The keep takes time. It took me a year, and I grew up 3 valleys from it. He set the log on his desk as though it belonged there. I studied him the way I studied all moving things, quietly, from a position of apparent stillness. I imagine you've had questions, he said. No, I said. He smiled again. He returned the log. His fingertips grazed the back of my hand, and the mineral scent arrived on my skin like a mark. Cold, momentary, specific. I catalogued it the way I catalogued everything. Once, completely, without expression. We're glad to have you, he said, as though the keep had voted. I walked back through the doorway and into the corridor and kept my pace even all the way to the eastern stairwell. Then I stood in the cold with the log pressed against my ribs and worked through what I had just confirmed. 3 scents in that room. His, iron and dry paper, and beneath those the third one, mineral and foreign, sharpest at the locked drawer. I had smelled the same compound in the air at the northern gate 2 mornings ago. Not on a person, in the air, moving with the wind from the road. The specific cold of it, the quality of something that had traveled a distance. I had 4 hours before the afternoon log run. I used 2 of them sitting in the alcove off the servants' passage, which no one used, and which therefore held no scent but stone and dust and my own manufactured absence. I laid out what I knew, and what I could not say I knew, and I laid them out separately, because they were not the same thing. The compound in Marek's drawer, the compound at the northern gate. The fact that Marek managed routes, departure times, patrol schedules, the where and when of a king moving through his own territory. If I warned the king and was wrong, I would be sent back to Ashgrove. My father's debt was already paid. There was no debt left to cancel, no function left to serve. There was only me, a woman who had proved worth less than nothing, walking back to a pack that had already said so in front of everyone. I thought about Ashgrove the way I thought about a calculation I had already finished. I did not want to go back. I had not known, until I was already here, how much I did not want to go back. I stood up. I went to Rorik's study in the early afternoon. I did not cross the threshold. I stood in the doorway, just outside the frame, stone cold under my feet, and he looked up from his maps, both hands flat on the northern border. The lamp low, the room smelling of cedar and coal dust, and the faint iron of the weapons rack. He did not speak. He looked at me with the gray-green eyes that had the quality of landing on something and not releasing it. "Don't use the northern road Thursday," I said. A long moment. "Why?" he said. Not a question. A courtesy. He was giving me the chance to explain before he decided what to do with the fact that I had come to his door at all. "I have no reason to give you." The silence had a specific texture. I could hear the wick. I could hear him breathe. Slow, controlled. The breathing of a decision being made somewhere I could not follow it. "Thursday," he said, as though writing it somewhere I couldn't see. I pulled the door closed. My hands were shaking. I had 4 days to find out whether I had been wrong, and nothing to do in them but wait. The 4 days passed the way 4 days pass when you are waiting to find out if you made a catastrophic mistake, slowly at the front of each minute, and then gone, suddenly, at the back of it. The patrol returned Sunday morning. I knew before they reached the gate. I smelled them coming up the north road. 12 men. No blood, no urgency in their footfall. And I stood in the inner corridor and counted. All 12. No ambush. No enemy. No wounded. Nothing happened on the northern road Thursday. That was the whole report, as I heard it from 50 feet away, through a closed door, his voice level, a few words, and then silence. Rorik did not look for me afterward. Marek did. He found me in the document corridor late that afternoon. Appeared, rather, the way he had a habit of appearing, as though he had been standing there some time before I noticed. He did not ask about Thursday directly. He asked about my mother's health. He asked how I was settling into the keep. He smiled with the warmth of someone performing warmth rather than feeling it, and I kept my hands still and my breathing even, and gave him nothing except the oil on my wrist and the careful nothing I wore over everything else. He was building something. I could not yet read the shape of it. By day 6, I had begun to believe Rorik had made the route change and forgotten why, or assigned the credit to better sources than me. The corridor felt ordinary again. I moved through it without watching my own hands. I catalogued the foreign compound I kept finding in the walls of Marek's study. Mineral, sharp, wrong. And filed it in the part of my mind I had reserved, since I was 8 years old, for things I could not act on. The summons came at evening on the 7th day. A boy with a sealed message. 4 words. No signature. Come to my chambers. I touched the duplicate vial in my pocket once, out of reflex, and went. His door was already open a hand's width when I reached it. A lamp burning on the desk, maps in 3 colors of ink, and Rorik standing at the window with his back to the room, looking out at the dark courtyard below. He said without turning, "Close the door." I closed it. There was a small dark glass bottle at the edge of his nearest map. Cork stoppered. The stain on the cork was one I would know anywhere. The amber stain from 15 years of daily use, my mother's fingerprint worn into the glass. Not my duplicate. The original. The one she had put into her own coat and never put back. I did not reach for it. Rorik turned from the window. He came around the edge of the desk and stopped closer than the desk required. Close enough that I could see the lamplight catch the gray-green of his eyes. Close enough that I could hear him breathe, a slow, deliberate sound, the specific breathing of a person who has decided not to be careless. He looked at me the way he had looked at me in the corridor on the second day, after his hand had come off my arm, like something to be solved. He said, "I wanted to understand your scent." I said nothing. "There is none," he said. Not an accusation. A fact delivered carefully, to someone whose reaction he hadn't yet mapped. He lifted his hand, slowly, the way one approaches something that might startle, and his fingers came to rest against the line of my jaw. Not grasping. The side of his hand, the knuckle below his index finger, along the angle of bone just below my ear. His thumb did not move. He was very still. His eyes had not left mine, and I could feel the warmth of him from less than an inch away, and I could not do anything about the way my breathing had gone shallow and was audible now in a room that had no other sound. He was about to say something. I could see it arrive in his face before it reached his mouth, the shape of a sentence he had been carrying for some time and had just now decided to say. His mouth opened. The first word was there. Then the knock came. Hard, urgent, 3 times fast against stone. He took his hand back. He crossed to the door and opened it without looking at me. And he was gone. He was going to say it. He was going to say it, and I was going to have to answer. I know what it was. I have known since his hand was at my jaw, and I was already afraid. I am afraid now. I am afraid I have not been afraid enough. He took it from Ashgrove before the ceremony. He has been carrying it for a week, trying to find something that is not there, because I made sure there is nothing to find. I did this. I am still doing this. The lamp burned on the desk. The original vial was at the edge of the map, exactly where it had been, and I was holding it. I did not remember picking it up. My hand had gone for it without my permission, the way it always went for things she taught me to reach for. I stood in the middle of his room and held it between both palms and listened to the echo of that knocking still dying in the stone of the stairwell, and understood that he had been carrying this for 7 days. I set the vial back on the desk in exactly the position I found it, the smudge of my thumb on the glass already fading. I straightened the edge of a map I had not touched. Then I was in the corridor, then the stone stairwell, then not there. I did not hear who knocked. The morning of day 8 came in flat and cold, which was how danger usually arrived, quietly, and from the direction you had not been watching. Merrick found me in the document corridor before the rest of the keep was awake. He had come from his study, which meant he had been there since before I woke. I noted this and held it somewhere that did not show. He did not say anything threatening. He never said anything threatening. He tilted his head and smiled, and told me he had noticed something curious. That I had warned the king about the northern road on day 3, and that the king's own guard had confirmed, on Merrick's quiet inquiry, that I had made no contact with any of the 3 people who might have known the route schedule. He used the word curious 3 times. He said he was raising it only out of concern for the king's safety. He said he was sure, between the 2 of us, that I could offer some kind of explanation. I told him I had no explanation to give him. He smiled wider. He said that was what he had been afraid of. I spent the next 2 hours carrying documents between offices. I moved at the same pace I always moved, and covered the corridor twice. The passage outside Merrick's study smelled exactly as it had at dawn. Iron, dry paper, and the mineral compound underneath that still had no name. Rorik summoned me before midday. Not his chambers. The study, with its maps pinned flat under iron weights and a guard at the door who did not look at me when I crossed the threshold. He did not offer me a seat. "Merrick tells me you warned about the northern road," he said. "He tells me you had no source." "That's true." He says a foreigner with no verifiable scent and no explained access to route information is a liability. Also true. He was looking at me the way he looked at maps, finding the gap, the unmarked territory, the edge where the charted lines stopped. So I told him, all of it, my mother's hands on my face when I was 6, her voice low against my ear. They will kill you for this, so you will be nothing for them, so you will practice. The oil she mixed herself and never named. The years of arriving at facts no one had given me and finding words for how I knew them that contained no truth. The morning I had mapped Vorn Keep's ground floor by scent before the fires were lit. What Merrick's study held, catalogued from the corridor over 3 passes. Iron, dry paper, and underneath those a mineral compound belonging to no plant or rock in these hills. What Merrick himself smelled like under the warm voice and the pressed sash, and the 3 uses of the word curious. There is a locked drawer in his study, I said. Bottom right. Whatever is in it carries the same compound. Rorik was quiet for a moment. Then, show me where the drawer is. I walked him to the threshold of Merrick's study. I did not go in. Bottom right, I said. The key is on him. He went in with 2 guards. I stood in the corridor and held still and listened to the sound of a locked drawer being opened by a man who did not need a key when he held authority enough to simply require it. The ledger was gray cloth. I knew it from the guard's face when he handed it over. Merrick was detained before the afternoon meal. His gray sash was folded and left at the door to his quarters by a guard who kept his eyes down while he did it. Rorik came to the corridor afterward and said, without preamble, "The Caldermore Treaty is not part of this. It was sealed before Merrick committed treason. Removing him changes nothing about the alliance." I said I understood. He looked at me then. Once, only for a moment. And his face told me nothing I had not already built a wall around. The great hall filled at evening. Full court assembled. Elder Voss at the records table, the pack standing in rings along the walls, and Sabine in the treaty position, her posture the posture of someone who has never been told to make herself smaller, her expression giving nothing to anyone who was watching. I stood at the back. There was no way to leave without walking the full length of the room. So I stood. Rorik read the Caldermore terms aloud, his voice carried to every stone corner. He did not look once toward the back of the hall. I told him what I am. I found them the proof. I used the only thing I had left to give, and he is reading her name aloud in the hall, and he will not look at me. The court dispersed, and I did not wait to watch it go. I took the servants' corridor, the back route, the one assigned to me on the first night, and I counted my footsteps without deciding to. The hall emptied behind me. The shuffle of feet against stone. The heavy door at the east end falling shut with the sound of something decided. I did not look back. I was being very deliberate about not looking back. My room had 1 lamp, a cot, a window facing the inner courtyard. I sat on the edge of the cot with my hands flat on my knees and I did not take off my boots. I told myself this was practical. If I needed to walk out of here tonight, I should be ready. I told him what I was. I gave him Marek with nothing left in reserve. Named the drawer without entering the room, handed over the only thing my mother told me would keep me safe, gave it across a desk in under a minute, because he looked at me like he already knew the shape of the truth, and I could not keep hiding it from someone who was already looking straight at it. He read Sabine's name in the hall. He did not look at me while he read it. I uncapped the duplicate vial out of reflex. 1 drop on the left wrist, cap replaced. My mother's hands, her armor. The borrowed scent rose and faded, and the lamp on the sill threw a low orange light across the stone floor. I counted the stones between the door and the cot. There were 11. I counted them again. I was still counting when the door opened without a knock. He filled the frame the way he filled every door frame. Without effort. Without announcing it. The same dark coat. The fine threadwork at the cuffs catching the lamplight once as he pushed the door shut behind him. He took in the room, the cot, the single lamp, the smallness, and did not look surprised. He looked at it the way he looked at things he was accounting for. Then he looked at me. "There was a tactical reason," he said. Not an apology. A fact laid down before anything else. "Someone tracks my movements by scent. A woman who leaves no trail is protection. That is why I chose you at the circle." A pause. He did not look away. "I did not choose you because you leave no trail." I did not speak. The lamp made no sound. "I chose you because I wanted to understand what you were." He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched to my eye level. It cost him nothing physically. It cost him something else entirely. His eyes in the low light were gray-green, and they landed on mine and did not move. And I did. He said the third thing. The hollow. His voice was even. He said it once, without amendment, as though saying it twice would shrink it. "The mask. I know what it is. I have done it. Not the same way, but the work of it. Taking something true and making it look like a lack so no one comes for it. I know what it costs. I knew what it was the moment I saw you hold yourself still in that corridor. You are not worth nothing. The hollow is not a deficit. It is the most careful thing I have ever seen someone build to survive, and it is the reason I cannot do without you." I was aware that my hands were very still in my lap. I was aware that if I looked away from him right now, I would not be able to look back. "You suspected?" I said. Not a question. "The corridor. Day 2. Your hand came up before I rounded the corner." The pause was brief. "Before Thursday. Before you told me anything." He reached up. His palm settled against my jaw. Not tentative, not forceful. The touch of someone who had already decided. And his thumb traced the line of my cheekbone. Slow. I felt it in places that had nothing to do with my face. He did not look away. The lamp was the only light. His hand was warm in the cold I had been carrying since the great hall, since I stood at the back of it and watched him read a name that was not mine. He had said what needed saying. What came next was not words. The pack had called me the Hollow since I was a girl. They meant it as a wound. They were not entirely wrong about the shape of the thing, only about the reason. I had not been empty. I had been full and trying not to show it, holding a door shut for 24 years against everything that wanted to come through. His hall had been cedar smoke and fear sweat, and Sabine's rosewater, precise enough that I could have named every person in it without opening my eyes. I had kept the door shut through all of it. 7 days of corridors and council rooms, and sitting across from him at tables while he pretended not to watch me, and I pretended not to notice. His hand on my jaw now. The lanolin in his coat from the morning's ride, the cold of the room and underneath it, closer and warmer than I had any reason to know, him. I felt the door move. I did not stop it. I had spent 24 years afraid of exactly this, and I was still afraid, and the fear had changed shape entirely, and I did not know what it was afraid of anymore. He moved his hand from my jaw to the back of my head and pulled me toward him, and when his mouth found mine, it was not soft and it was not careful. It was someone who had been holding something back for 7 days and had stopped holding it. I gripped the front of his coat. The wool was cold, and he was not. He was not. His mouth opened against mine, and I stopped thinking about the hall, about the treaty read aloud into the silence, about Sabine standing composed and certain at the edge of the dais. I stopped thinking about anything at all. It was the first time in 24 years I had managed it. When I came back to myself, the room was entirely quiet. The wind had dropped. I was aware of my bare shoulders, the cold behind me at the wall, the blanket draped on the chair arm that I reached for and pulled around us both without quite deciding to. He let me. His arm came around me, and I felt the whole weight of him settle, unhurried, like something that had been waiting a long time to do exactly this. His jaw was against my temple. His breath was slow. The door I had held shut my whole life was open, and I could not find the handle, and I had stopped looking for it. His scent was all the way through me, wood smoke, and the lanolin again, and something underneath both that I had refused to name all week, and now could not stop knowing. I lay there in the warmth of him with the cold still in the walls, and understood that I was not going to sleep. Neither, for a long time, was he. The lamp on the sill was still burning. The lamp had burned out sometime in the hours before Gray arrived. The fire was low coals. Rorik's arm was across my waist, the weight of it specific and settled. The weight of someone who had not moved because he had decided not to, not because he had forgotten I was there. I lay still, and did not close my eyes again. The ceiling of his chambers was black stone, worn smooth above the fireplace. I had not looked at a ceiling this long since I was 7, and my mother sat beside my bed in the dark. "This is what you are," she said. "This is what it costs." That had also been a burned-down fire, a thing that could not be untold. I went through it carefully, the way I went through a corridor, piece by piece, in order, without flinching at what I found. He had taken the vial before the ceremony, not after I was handed over, not during the reading of the terms. Before. He had gone into the Ashgrove inventory and found the one thing that was specifically mine and put it in his coat, and then he had stood at the far end of the stone circle and waited. Before he had seen me standing in the lineup, before he knew which daughter Ashgrove would produce. I had spent 7 days believing he had taken it to understand my scent. He had. I had not asked myself what it meant that he had gone looking, before he had any reason to believe there was something there to understand. He had changed the northern route on a Thursday because I had stood in a doorway and said, "Don't use the road." I had no reason to give him. He had written it down somewhere I could not see, and then rearranged 12 armed men, and said nothing to me for 4 days. No proof required, no explanation given, no follow-up. Just Thursday, and then silence. And then the patrol came back, and the northern road had been empty. In the document corridor, the second afternoon, he had touched my arm to keep me from falling, and then looked at his own hand afterward. I had logged it and filed it immediately as information I could not afford to have. I had been right that I could not afford it. I had been wrong about what it was. He had solved me. While I was hiding. While I was applying oil to my wrists each morning and counting the minimum words that would account for what I knew without naming how I knew it. He had been watching all of it and adding it up, and he had carried the sum in his coat pocket for 7 days. He figured out what I was before I told him. He carried my mother's oil in his coat for a week. He is going to make whatever this is into something the court has to look at tomorrow. Yes. All right. Yes. I heard him wake behind me. His breathing changed. A slow, deliberate thing. The way a man breathes when he has already decided not to pretend he is still asleep. "The court assembles tomorrow," he said. He had not moved. "I know," I said. Neither of us said what that meant yet. I sat at the edge of his bed and looked at the gray light coming in at the east window. My hands were in my lap. I did not reach for the duplicate vial in the pocket of my coat, folded on the chair beside me. I did not reach for it, and after a moment, I understood I was not going to. The hall smells of 40 people holding still. I keep pace with him through the great doors and into the open center, and I do not look at the rings along the walls, because if I look, I will count. And if I count, I will lose the thread of what I am doing, which is walking forward and not stopping. The stone floor under my feet is the same stone floor it was 3 days ago. Everything else is not. Rorik stops in the center of the hall. He reaches into his coat and takes out the original vial. My mother's oil. The cork is stained dark from years of daily use. Her hands, not mine. He uncorks it without ceremony. The smell of dried wildflowers rises into the hall air, faint and borrowed, familiar in a way I cannot explain to anyone who was not raised inside the hiding, and then it fades into the cold stone quiet. The oil strikes the floor. It runs into the seams between the flags. "She does not need a borrowed scent," he says. His voice carries to the back of every ring. It always does. She never did. Then he kneels. Not slowly, not with ceremony. Just down, one knee on the stone where my mother's oil runs into the flags. He takes my hand in both of his. His hands are warmer than I expected. I notice this before I notice the hall. He is kneeling. The Alpha King is kneeling. I have spent 24 years telling myself I wanted nothing, needed nothing, that the hollow was a strength and not a wound. And now his hands are around mine, and I know, with perfect clarity, that I lied. The hall notices before I do. It happens in stages. The front ring first, then the second, then all the way back, one sound moving through the stone like water finding level. Not applause. Something older than that. I didn't cry at the border. I didn't cry in the antechamber. I'm not going to cry now in front of 300 wolves, including the woman in the fourth ring who once told me I smelled like nothing, which meant I was nothing, which I remember perfectly. I think I should have worn better boots. His thumb moves once across my knuckles. He does not speak. The record is being made by every eye in the room, and he stays down until I understand that he is not getting up until I am ready. Elder Voss opens a ledger on the record table. Gray cloth, old, the edges crumbling. Not Marek's root book. The other one. He reads the law as it was written before either of us was born. The inverted scent line, the name for what I am. The precedent that calls it a warden's gift and not a deficit. I have been named twice in this hall. Both times on the record. They will sit beside each other for as long as this hall stands. Sabine's representative accepts the alternative terms without leaving his seat. The treaty is set aside. It is over quickly, which is its own kind of courtesy. The court sees it. Every ring of it. It is on the record and it will not be undone. He looked at me the way you look at something you have already decided. He had. He just needed me to believe it too.